Going back doesn't feel like retreat. It feels like rest. That's the seduction. Your old identity isn't dragging you backward. It's standing at the door saying, you can stop trying so hard now. The problem isn't that you want to rest. The problem is you can't tell the difference. That's not weakness. It's a threshold. Welcome to Daily Power Boost. I'm Sean Michael. This isn't a podcast about pushing harder or fixing yourself. It's a space to see clearly how your experience is actually being created. Each episode offers a simple shift in understanding. Not a tactic, not a hustle. A clearer view of thought, identity, and the patterns you've been living inside. Because when misunderstanding drops, relief rises, energy returns. You move forward with calm, sovereign clarity. This is your daily power boost. You don't go back because you failed. You go back because it felt like relief. That's what no one talks about. Not the relapse into old patterns or the slow drift back toward what used to be yours. Those things happen all the time. People call them setbacks, failures, signs that maybe the new thing wasn't actually real. But that's not what I'm naming today. I want to look at something more specific, something quieter, and honestly, far more dangerous. I'm looking at the moment the old identity stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like a place you could finally exhale. You walked out, did the work, you even crossed the threshold that took you years to reach. One day, maybe recently, that new ground felt unstable and the old ground felt solid. So you moved toward that. It's not failure. That's the seduction, and it's worth understanding. What I want to go over today isn't the retreat itself. It's the story you tell about it. Because the retreat rarely announces itself as a retreat. Sounds like wisdom. I was pushing too hard. I needed to slow down. Maybe I was trying to become someone I'm not. Those sentences, they can all be true. They can also be the old identity buying itself more time. The line between genuine rest and strategic retreat is thinner than it looks. Today, we're going to find it. Someone I worked with sent me an email a few weeks ago. I want to tell you about it because it's one of the most honest things someone has ever put into words. She'd been doing serious identity work for close to a year. Real work. The kind where you show up to the uncomfortable mirror and stay in front of it instead of walking away. She was delegating things she used to grip. Stopped explaining herself to people who weren't asking the right questions. Even her sleep had shifted. Those aren't small things. For the specific identity she'd been operating from most of her adult life, these were seismic. And then, gradually, she noticed herself drifting. It wasn't dramatic. Delegation slowed down. Those explanations came crawling back in. The sleep stayed better, but everything else was quietly reversing. She didn't know if it was backsliding or wisdom. She ended with one question. How do I know if I'm resting in who I'm becoming or simply going back to who I was? That's the question. That's the whole episode, really. What I've seen working at the identity level is that the old identity doesn't usually make a dramatic return. Doesn't arrive as a crisis. It's comfort. As the voice that says, this new version of you is exhausting. It's true. New identities are exhausting before they become stable. You're running new patterns through an old nervous system. That's going to be hard. But the old identity knows that. It's patient. It's been waiting at the edge of all your growth. Quiet, familiar, looking and smelling like home. And the moment the new ground feels unstable, it offers you exactly what the new identity can't yet: certainty. Notice if you've been calling that certainty wisdom. It's not an accident, the seduction, not moral failure or weakness. It's just the survival identity doing what it was always designed to do: keep you safe, small, from venturing too far past the edge of what it can manage. The survival identity isn't evil, it's just loyal to a version of you that no longer runs the show. That's the diagnosis. Going back feels like rest, because the old identity built the bed. The difference, when you can finally feel it, isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive as clarity. It comes as a question, a single, quiet question sitting in the back of your chest. When you notice yourself drifting, is this rest or is it avoidance dressed up as rest? When you're actually resting in the new identity, you don't lose the thread. You just put it down. There's a difference. Putting something down looks like intentional space. You know what you're setting down and why. And you know you're coming back. There's no urgency in the return because the return never in question. Going back looks different. There's a quiet relief that feels like an exhale, but lands more like disappearing. You stop thinking about the work, stop feeling the pull. Things get quieter in a way that feels earned, but it isn't quite. And then 2 weeks later, you look up and you're somewhere familiar that you thought you'd left. When someone has learned to tell the difference, I notice one specific thing. They stop asking whether they deserve the rest. That question, that's part of the old identity. The new one doesn't need permission to pause. It pauses and stays oriented. It breathes, but doesn't lose the thread. You'll know you're resting in who you're becoming when the ground still feels like yours, even if you're not standing at attention on it. One question to carry with you today. When you go quiet or reach for something familiar, what are you telling yourself it means? Sit with that. You don't need to analyze it, just notice. Notice whether the answer sounds like wisdom or like a voice that's been very patient. On the next episode, the old identity doesn't just seduce you with comfort, it recruits the people around you. We're going to talk about what happens in your relationships when you start holding the new ground. Some people, they're going to be relieved. Other people won't. And it won't have anything to do with you. With Strength and Heart, I'm Shawn Michael. Stay close. Thanks for tuning in to Daily Power Boost. Ignite your potential. Remember, transformation starts with action. So take today's insight, make it your own, and awaken your inner potential. Because remember, greatness begins within. Catch you tomorrow for your next Power Boost.